Welcome to the Nightlife Podcast. Have you ever dismissed a dream as just the pizza or stress from the day? More often than we realize, the symbols and stories in our dreams contain divine revelation hidden for us to discover. Once you realize this gift that's been yours all along, you'll never go back to spending the nightlife just sleeping. I was out hiking on a beautiful day in the forest this summer when suddenly assaulted with the awful smell of death. Looking around, I couldn't see anything, so I proceeded cautiously. A few steps later, my heart skipped a beat when a huge hawk flew up into the air just in front of me, and I instantly saw what I had smelled, a dead animal the hawk had been feasting on until my dog and I came too close for comfort. I always pause and smile when I see hawks soaring majestically in the distance, but encountering this one up close was definitely unsettling. In another story, someone I know stopped to take pictures of a young hawk perched on a tree branch. To this day, she can't explain why, but she suddenly had the instinct to drop down. The moment she did, an adult hawk narrowly missed, crashing into her head at full speed from behind. Apparently, the cute little fluff she was admiring had a defender guarding from above, like a hawk, as the saying goes. Hawks and eagles can be symbolic of prophetic gifting because they fly higher than other birds and have amazing eyesight, strength, and precision. While not everyone is called to be a prophet, it's amazing to consider how we all have been gifted by our Creator with a vast array of natural and spiritual senses that alert us to danger. Have you ever been stopped in your tracks by a smell, sound, sight, thought, or feeling that thrust you into an instant state of alertness? Relating this to the nightlife, have you ever had a dream that warned you or gave you an uneasy sense about a person or situation? About half of the dreams mentioned in the Bible were warning dreams, and this is a common category of dream I have myself and hear about from others. I'm excited to hear from several dreamers today who've received warnings through dreams. Usually, warning dreams will be a confirmation of something you've already been sensing in your waking life, but not always. I recently had an unsettling warning dream about a gigantic snake wrapping around my family. Within a few days, we found ourselves in a trial that really caught us off guard. Even though I wasn't able to stop what was coming, I instantly had more spiritual clarity because of the nature of the snake I had seen in my dream. Several days later, I had a Marvel superhero action movie kind of dream where I was waking up just as another battle was about to begin. While this was an intense fighting dream, the overall tone was victorious, and I believed I was receiving intel that another wave of this trial was coming, along with the counsel to stay in a battle-ready posture. I was thankfully prepared to have my feet firmly planted when the next surge came just 2 days later. I'm convinced, based on biblical history and many of my own experiences, both where I've heeded and ignored warnings I was receiving, that God wants to equip us ahead of time for what He sees as coming. Paul, who had more hardships in his life than most of us ever will, said in Romans 8 that despite all these things, we are more than conquerors through Jesus who loved us. Being a conqueror implies battle, yet what an honor that we all have access to the same Spirit that empowered Jesus while He lived on this earth to teach, guide, encourage, correct, and warn us. 2 Peter 1:3 says that His divine power has given us all things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of Him who called us. As we come into God's kingdom and learn how to radically depend on Him, we'll be amazed as we see how much goodness and freedom He desires to pour into our lives and through our lives to others. Priscilla dreamed she was at a property in the mountains belonging to friends of her grandparents who lived within walking distance. It was morning and she needed to use the bathroom and take a shower, so she decided to walk to her grandparents' house since her friends were still asleep in their own cabins on the property. On her way, she felt a small poop slip out, so she went to a rustic bathroom on the property, cleaned up, and walked out to go shower. This dream was a warning about past and present pain that was affecting her more deeply than she realized. It came at a time when Priscilla was feeling suddenly separated from the friends who were sleeping in her dream. The loss of their friendship affected not only her, but her children in profound ways, which these friends were unaware of due to a crisis they were dealing with in their own lives. Her grandparents were not godly people, and she has shameful memories of things she was exposed to in their home as a child. The fact that this dream was in the morning and involved her seeking a bathroom and a place to shower seems to correlate to a new beginning where she'll be purged and cleansed from every stain of shame, rejection, abandonment, and loss that has affected her family in the past and the present. There's also a strong message from God that the actions of others do not define her or her children's worthiness to be loved. This dream was a warning that deep roots of rejection and shame needed to be dealt with, and also a beautiful invitation to take hold of truth that will set her free once and for all. We all have pain in this life, and the only way for it truly to be healed and redeemed is when we surrender it to God, who knows what we need more deeply than we could ever know ourselves. Thanks, Priscilla, for sharing this vulnerable and powerful dream. On the practical side, one listener had this dream at a time he was considering selling his house. He dreamed that his realtor texted everyone in his neighborhood that a storm was coming, temperatures were going to drop, and to turn off their gas and electricity. She also said to make sure to keep their house prices up for after the storm had passed. The dreamer took this to be a warning that the housing market was going to go down, illustrated by falling temperatures. Cutting the gas and electricity equated to feeling uncomfortable during the market decline. But the overall message was that the storm would pass quickly, which gave him confirmation of what he had already been considering, to hold off on selling his house until the market recovered. An amazing couple I met at our dream booth this summer, Matthew and Ariel, shared their grief over so much death in their family in recent years. After Ariel's mom died, she had a dream that she was with her mom playing bingo. At one point, she couldn't find her mom and was looking frantically for her. She finally found her, and her mom told Ariel that she had to let her go, that they had called her, and this was the end of the dream. Ariel sensed that God was telling her to let her mom go, and also giving her a warning about not trying to contact her mom through dreams, because the enemy would be able to deceive her through this. We talked about necromancy, the occult practice of trying to contact the dead. She also said she came to accept God's ordained separation between the living and the dead, and to find comfort and hope that she will be reunited to her mom in heaven. I really appreciated this couple's authenticity to share all their family's gone through, and their determination to turn to God for comfort and hope, and not to console themselves with anything that's not from Him. Our interaction was beautifully orchestrated as another dreamer who happened to be at the booth sharing his own dreams proceeded to share how he sees that God sees this couple and to pray over them. I'm always in awe of God's divine timing and the power of His people just showing up and offering what they have to others in their time of need. You all inspire me so much. Brinley, a teenager, had a warning dream about someone in their church leadership. This man was carelessly driving down their road when he hit both of her cats right in front of her and didn't even stop. She was so afraid to look, but found that thankfully, her cat Peanut had survived, although he had lost most of his tail. All Brinley wanted to do in that moment was to get revenge and hurt the man who had done this. She thinks her dream may have been a reflection of her experience with this church leader, whose personality, she says, is gruff, but she hadn't felt that he was actually a bad guy. She wasn't receiving from him as a teacher and had felt overwhelmed by critical comments he made, which she realized had led her to feel guarded around him. While she assumed the meaning of her dream was straightforward, pointing to the literal dynamics she had already experienced with him as a leader, she reached out to me with a concern that there was a broader warning to this dream. What if her cats not only represented things precious to her, but also their congregation, such as people's hearts or their faith that he had a position of leadership and influence over? Of course, God who gave her this dream was the only one who could show her the meaning. So the conclusion of our conversation was for her to pray against everything she saw in the dream, for this leader to grow in Christ-like character, and for protection over the people who could be harmed by his carelessness and criticism. Fascinatingly, he stepped down from his position at their church within months. Brinley may only know in heaven if her partnership in prayer to what God was showing her actually protected their congregation from harm. But what an honor it is to receive such an assignment. It wouldn't be the first time in history God chose a teenage girl to do His amazing work on this earth. Thanks so much for sharing, Brinley. George is another dreamer we met at the park this summer, and like so many, we were in awe hearing his life story. Several years ago, he dreamed that he went to a store where a friend of his was the clerk. He bought something, and his friend, the clerk, gave him back the change. As he was putting the change into his pocket, his friend said something that led him to take it out of his pocket and put it on the handlebars of his bicycle. Then his friend told him it's best to keep the change in circulation, so he gave all the change back to the clerk to put into the drawer. The context of this dream was that his friend had just surrendered his life to Jesus, but George had not yet. Within a month of the dream, George did go all in for Jesus, and 2 days later, his wife left him. This is the change he believes the dream was referring to. We interpreted the bicycle to represent how his entire life up until that point had been dependent on his own effort, pushing to keep going. Him putting the change back into circulation could illustrate surrender, sowing all that had happened in his life to be used however God chooses. Like so many others, this dream was both a warning and an encouragement for what was ahead. We prayed for revelation of how to live empowered by God's grace, not his own self-effort, and also acceleration into the next chapter of the redemption story that God had authored for him from before time began. What a powerful message! God in his goodness is always calling us into closer relationship with him so that he can lead us through this life by his truth, wisdom, goodness, and love. Jesus said in John 16 that in this world we will have tribulation, but to be of good cheer because he has overcome the world. Warnings are one powerful way God's Spirit is at work in our lives, either to steer us away from or lead us in triumph through hardships. I'm sure we all have stories where we can look back and acknowledge we knew something was wrong, but didn't heed the warning. Proverbs 22:3 says, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty." Suffering through my own many failures to heed God's counsel in my life has actually thrusted me into the radical dependence on him I now live by. Psalm 103 is one of my favorite reminders of this. Know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who has made us, not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. The thing is, sheep aren't very smart and need a shepherd. There are entire books written about this dynamic in our relationship with God. Learning to listen for his voice and trust him with every aspect of our lives, even our very life itself, is an adventure we're all invited deeper into every day. I hope today's episode was an encouragement that God wants to speak to you, to show you things you couldn't otherwise know, and lead you to triumph in this life. One way he does this is through dreams, and stewarding the revelation he's releasing to us in the night while we are quiet, at rest, and most receptive to him is one of the greatest treasures in my life, and I hope it is in yours too. If you have dreams to contribute or that you need help interpreting, please reach out to me using the contact button on my website at www.thenightlife-podcast.com. Also, let me know if you have recommendations for future episodes, or if you're interested in being interviewed for the show. I'm always inspired connecting with other dreamers, and this podcast could not exist without you. Thanks so much for listening.